Start the new day with an optimistic spirit, and the rest of the day will be smoother. Vernon Howard. In the morning, as the first sunlight filters through the window, the human mind is like a pristine sheet of white paper. The first thoughts we inscribe upon it will quietly shape the entire emotional canvas that follows. If the first stroke is one of anxiety, the whole page can easily be shrouded in heavy hues. But if that stroke is one of hope, the page will gradually transform into a vibrant painting more radiant than we could imagine. Morning emotions are like the headwaters of a river. When the source is clear and pure, the water carries freshness to every bend. A small smile, a positive thought, or simply a gentle self-affirmation can spread that energy throughout the long day. An optimist is not someone who has never faced difficulties. They simply choose to view difficulties as temporary clouds obscuring the sun, not as a sky that has lost its light. The morning attitude is not just a fleeting emotion, but a deliberate mindset. It's like choosing the direction for a boat before setting sail. When the course is right, the wind, strong or weak, still propels the boat forward. A day is the same. When the mind is ignited with positivity, the day's challenges cease to be walls and become small steps to climb higher. And strangely enough, when we begin the day with that gentle faith, the world seems to respond with more pleasant things, not because life changes instantly, but because our eyes have learned to find light in the most ordinary things. That is the quiet power of an optimistic spirit, a small flame in the soul, enough to warm an entire day. You have to think of big things while doing small things, so that all the small things go in the right direction. Alvin Toffler. In life, people are often swept up in countless small tasks. A phone call, a plan, a page to read, or a seemingly ordinary decision. But if those actions exist only as scattered fragments, they are like bricks lying haphazardly on the ground, plentiful but forming no house. Only when a grand vision exists in the mind do each small brick find its proper place. A big vision acts like a compass for consciousness. It doesn't shorten the path, but it prevents us from getting lost. When people focus only on what's right in front of them and forget the farther goal, they easily fall into a state of busyness but emptiness, doing a lot but not knowing where they're headed. Conversely, when a big dream resides in the mind, each small action becomes meaningful. An hour of study is not just an hour passing by, but a stone laid in the foundation of the future. A small effort today becomes a stepping stone for tomorrow's achievement. An architect is building a skyscraper. The workers lay each brick, mix each bucket of cement. Their work seems repetitive and minor, but in the architect's mind, there is always the complete image of the building. The high floors, the frames, the light shining into each room. That image guides every small operation, making every detail serve a larger structure. Each person's life is similar. The small things are the daily pulses of life, while the big thoughts are the heart directing those pulses. When we think far while acting near, keeping a broad vision in simple actions, then each small step is no longer ordinary. They become quiet but steady footsteps, leading us gradually to where our dreams await. The best way to overcome difficulty is always to face it directly. Robert Frost. Difficulties often resemble a long shadow on the ground at dusk. When we turn our back and run, that shadow seems to stretch longer, clinging persistently. But when we turn around and step straight toward the light, that shadow shrinks beneath our feet. What we fear is often not the difficulty itself, but the exaggerated imagination in our minds. People tend to avoid things that make them uneasy. Avoidance initially brings a temporary sense of safety, like closing the door to not see the rain outside. But the rain still exists, and the longer we delay, the more it builds into a greater storm. Conversely, when we open the door and step out, accepting the first drops of rain, we soon realize we are strong enough to continue. Facing difficulties is the way for the mind to escape the cage of fear. Each challenge is like a rock blocking a river. If we stop and complain, the flow of life stagnates. But if we step onto that rock, it becomes a stepping stone to the other side. Thus, difficulties are not just obstacles, but silent tools for forging resilience. It is in the moment when people dare to look straight at the problem that they discover an inner strength they never knew they possessed. Facing is not an act of recklessness, but a manifestation of maturity. It's like lighting a lamp in a dark room. Darkness doesn't need to be defeated by force. It just needs to be seen clearly. And when the light of courage appears, the difficulties that once made us tremble gradually lose their power, giving way to calmness, confidence, and the belief that we can always move forward. It's not that I'm so smart. It's just that I stay with problems longer. Albert Einstein. Many people imagine that success belongs to those with innately brilliant minds, those who can see the solution in an instant. But in reality, intelligence is often not a flash of lightning in a second, but a smoldering flame burning for hours, days, even years. Persistence is the fuel that nourishes that flame. When facing a tough problem, the human mind often reacts like entering a dense forest. At first, everything is tangled, paths obscured, and the feeling of being lost makes many want to turn back to the old road. But the persistent one is different. They proceed slowly, clearing each branch, tracing each faint mark. Each minute of thinking, each failed attempt, is like opening another clearing in that forest. In the end, the path doesn't appear because they are smarter than others, but because they stayed long enough to see it. Persistence is also a manifestation of a special kind of emotional intelligence. It requires calmness in the face of failure, acceptance that solutions don't always come immediately. The persistent person understands that every problem is like a complex lock. Each attempt turns the key a little more. Some give up after a few initial turns, but others continue until they hear the faint click of unlocking. Intelligence lies not only in the speed of thinking, but in the endurance of focus. The one who stays with the question longer often sees more angles, understands the problem deeper, and ultimately finds the solution that the hasty have missed. Sometimes, the difference between an ordinary person and an exceptional one is not talent, but a simple decision. They choose not to abandon the problem too soon, and that quiet perseverance, over time, turns effort into understanding, and understanding into wisdom. Success is often the result of making mistakes, but going in the right direction. Bernstein. People often imagine that success is a straight path, where every step is precise and there's no room for error. But in reality, that path is like a winding trail on a mountainside, sometimes slipping, sometimes turning wrong. But if the overall direction is toward the summit, every mistake becomes part of the journey. A mistake is not a sign of failure, but a signal that a person is in motion. Only those who dare to walk have the chance to stumble, and each stumble is like a silent dialogue between the person and reality. Reality responds with experience, and the person learns to adjust their steps. If we go in the wrong direction, mistakes only lead us farther astray. But when the direction is right, each mistake is like a signpost, helping us understand the road ahead. A person is rowing a boat out to the vast sea. Winds and waves make the boat sway. Sometimes the rower must adjust the oars, change the angle, even circle a bit. On the surface, these seem like mistaken or off-course movements, but in essence, all serve one single goal: keeping the boat advancing toward the horizon. Success operates in the same way. It is not created by perfection, but by the ability to adjust after each mistake. The most important thing is not to avoid all mistakes, but to maintain a correct overall direction. When the goal is clear enough, and the will is resilient enough, mistakes lose their frightening appearance. They become vivid lessons, small turns that help us understand ourselves better and the path we're on. And one day, looking back, we realize that those moments that seemed like getting lost were quietly leading us to what we call success. The important thing is that consistency in strategic direction and continuous improvement in the way of doing work are completely compatible with each other. In fact, they support each other. Michael Porter, people need a stable direction to avoid getting lost, but at the same time, they need flexibility to avoid stagnation. Strategy is like the North Star in the night sky, a fixed point of light, helping travelers know where they're going. Meanwhile, small improvements in working methods are like adjusted footsteps on a rugged path, making the journey more efficient and steady. Many people mistakenly think that steadfastness and change are opposites. They believe that if you hold firm to the strategy, you must keep the methods unchanged, or if you want to improve, you must change the entire direction. But in reality, these two elements are like the trunk and leaves of a tree. The trunk needs to stand firm so the tree doesn't fall, while the leaves must constantly change with the seasons for the tree to continue growing. An organization or a person is the same. When the long-term vision is held steady, every improvement in action is like small branches extending, helping the big goal be realized better. Consistency provides a sense of stability and meaning to actions. It helps people understand that their efforts are directed toward a clear destination. Continuous improvement nurtures a spirit of learning, making each workday a small step forward. When these two elements combine, work is no longer monotonous repetition, but a continuous process of growth. A boat is heading toward a distant island. The boat's direction must always be stable, but the way the sailor adjusts the sails, oars, and steering angle constantly changes with the wind and waves. It is thanks to that combination that the boat both maintains its goal and utilizes the power of circumstances. Consistency in strategy and innovation in action are not contradictory. They are like two beats of the same heart, together propelling people forward in a resilient and intelligent way. Failure is great data telling you which direction to avoid. PayalKadakia. People often see failure as a period, a slip that wounds self-esteem. But if observed deeper, failure is actually like an honest report that life sends back to us. It carries no judgment, only information. This path is ineffective. This method is not right. This direction needs adjustment. In the world of growth mindset, failure acts like a navigation system. When we step in the wrong direction, it sends a warning signal to prevent us from going deeper into a dead end. An explorer in a dense forest doesn't see encountering a dead end as a disaster. On the contrary, each eliminated path helps him understand the forest's map better. The more wrong paths identified, the clearer the right path becomes. Thus, failure is not a loss, but a valuable form of data that only real experience can provide. What makes failure heavy is not the event itself, but how people interpret it. If we see failure as proof of incompetence, it becomes a burden. But if we view it as feedback, the mind immediately shifts from self-blame to learning. Then, each mistake is like a small mark on the journey's map, quietly pointing out areas to avoid. A person is finding the way out of a labyrinth. Each wrong turn initially seems useless, but actually, it narrows the search scope. In the end, those wrong turns create the necessary understanding to find the correct path. Life operates on a similar principle. When we dare to see failure as data, we turn seemingly negative experiences into vivid sources of knowledge. And in that moment, failure is no longer a wall blocking the way, but a silent signpost leading us closer to success. Research shows that true growth is contagious. So if you want to achieve your goals, You must be around people who are aiming for similar goals as you, and you will benefit from that success. Henry Cloud. People do not grow in isolation, but thrive in the flow of their surrounding environment. Each individual is like a small coal in a fire. Standing alone, it easily cools. But when next to other brightly burning coals, its flame flares up stronger. The human mind has the ability to absorb energy from the environment very naturally. When we live among people with clear goals, disciplined spirit, and aspiration to advance, those qualities gradually seep into our way of thinking, not through grand lectures, but through very quiet influences. How they work each day, how they face difficulties, how they persist with goals. Those things are like invisible waves spreading in the air, causing those nearby to begin adjusting their rhythm in a more positive direction. Conversely, if a person is in an environment lacking motivation, where people are accustomed to procrastination and content with mediocrity, the mind is easily pulled down without them even realizing. This is like swimming in a river. If the current flows strongly forward, you just need to swim with the rhythm to go far. But if the water is still or flowing backward, every meter forward becomes exponentially harder. Choosing companions on the journey of growth is not just a social matter, but a strategic decision in life. When we are around people who share the same aspirations and goals, their success doesn't make us smaller. On the contrary, it becomes a source of inspiration and motivation. Each of their steps forward is like a wind lifting our sails higher, and in that environment, growth is no longer a solitary effort of an individual, but a collective flow where everyone lifts each other up, advancing closer to goals they once thought were far away. Failure does not exist. It is only a change in direction. Alejandro Jodorowsky. Another way to look at the map of life. People often think that the journey to success must be a straight road, where every step leads directly to the destination. But in reality, life is more like a meandering river than a straight path. It has curves, sections that loop back, even times when it flows slowly, as if lost. However, those very curves help the water continue toward the vast ocean. What we call failure is actually the moment when our expectations don't match the outcome. We set a direction, but reality tells us that direction is not the most effective path. Viewed that way, failure is no longer a blocking wall, but like a road sign. Not this way, try another direction. It doesn't stop our journey. It only forces us to adjust our steps. A person is finding the path through a large maze. If he turns into a dead end, it doesn't mean he has failed. On the contrary, he has just learned important information. This path doesn't lead to the exit. Each discovered dead end makes the map in his head clearer. In the end, those wrong turns help him advance closer to the escape door. Life operates on a similar rule. When we dare to act, to try, to change, we are continuously adjusting our direction. Each adjustment is like a sailor, slightly turning the wheel in different winds. The boat may veer left, right, but the goal remains the ocean ahead. The important thing is not to avoid all deviations, but to maintain flexibility and courage to continue. When we view life from that perspective, failure loses its weight. It becomes a natural part of the exploration process, a necessary redirection to lead us to the path truly suited for us. And sometimes, those redirections that seemed like mistakes quietly lead us to places far better than the original plan. Change is inevitable. Change will always happen, but you have to apply direction to change, and that's when it's progress. Baldwin. The world is always in motion, and people cannot stand still in that flow. Time is like a river that never stops flowing. Each passing day brings new shifts, whether we notice them or not. Therefore, the important question is not whether change will occur, but whether we will let it sweep us away or learn to hold the wheel to direct that flow. Change often comes with a sense of unease because the familiar brings a sense of safety, while the new always contains unknowns. But looking deeper, change itself is the driving force of life. A tree cannot grow if it remains its initial size. A person cannot mature if their life forever repeats an old circle. Development is always tied to shifts in oneself. However, not every change leads to progress. If change is only random, people easily fall into a state of drifting like a leaf, carried by the wind without a destination. True progress only appears when people know how to direct that change. That requires vision, alertness, and the ability to self-adjust. When we know where we want to go, each small change in action is like a subtle adjustment, helping the boat advance closer to the desired shore. A sailor is setting out to sea. Sea winds constantly change direction. Waves always fluctuate. The sailor cannot stop the wind from blowing or calm the sea, but he can adjust the sails, turn the wheel, and use those very winds to advance. Human life is the same. Change is the law of the world, while progress is the art of directing that change. Mature people do not try to resist life's fluctuations, nor let themselves be carried along. They learn to see change as a source of energy, and when knowing how to direct that energy toward their goals, they turn life's shifts into a force for development. It is in that process that change is no longer frightening. It becomes the path to sustainable and profound progress.